Hello, friends.
Are Western governments and the Western media trying to interfere in India's election and delegitimize it? There are business and foreign policy considerations at work which would make this a very real possibility. The US and the West want India as a market, but preferably as one that plays by the rules that America makes. America also wants India as a strategic partner, but not as an equal partner. It wants India as a junior ally, subservient to American interests. A good example is where the US tells India to not buy Russian oil, only to be rebuffed by India. Or the United States, hoping that India will actively oppose China on military, business, and diplomatic issues. The problem is that India will oppose China only for its own interests, not to further American interests. As part of this effort, the US wants to keep the pressure up on India and hinder its efforts to assert itself on the world stage. This is the reason for the constant drumbeat about Hindu nationalism, cow lynchings, discrimination against Muslims and Christians, etc. The list goes on, and this is a constant effort to keep tarnishing the country's image. Whether the issues being raised are real or not seems to be irrelevant as long as they serve this purpose. For example, the US State Department recently raised questions about the Citizenship Amendment Act, calling it discriminatory against Muslims. I debunked this myth in a recent video, which you can check out on this channel. Overt manipulation of the Indian election or regime change, like the US did with Prime Minister Mossadegh in Iran in 1953 to further Western business interests, is of course out of the question now. India is far too big a country for that. The strategy now seems to be to use Indians themselves to subvert the country's interests and delegitimize the upcoming general election in an attempt to weaken the Modi government and its foreign policy position. For example, the US State Department, the German government, and the United Nations all raised questions about the liquor scam accused Arvind Kejriwal being arrested. The US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, dutifully echoed these statements sitting in New Delhi. I posted a video on this channel recently explaining why Kejriwal could, in fact, be a Western asset, funded and supported to advance Western interests in India. Look at this recent article in Time magazine from journalist Astha Rajvanshi, directly attacking India's election, saying the opposition is being placed at a political disadvantage. The typical Western strategy is to pick Indian origin journalists who will write what they want to publish and then reward them with carrots in the form of grants and rewards. This woman was given the Matthew Power Literary Reporting Award by New York University, which is well known for its leftist leanings. She received a fellowship from the Institute of Current World Affairs, an American think tank which has previously sponsored well known anti India personalities like the Indian American Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State. These writers are basically mouthpieces for the Western agenda, with the goal being to keep India on the back foot no matter what, and to almost never report anything positive about the country's government or its systems. Look at another recent article, this one from Rohan Mukherjee, an Indian origin professor at the London School of Economics. He writes that India is pursuing a Hindu nationalist foreign policy and that it should not be asserting itself in international affairs as it is doing now, as this could displease the American government. He says a nationalistic foreign policy is not a good path for India to follow. This article is basically full of things that US diplomats would like to say out loud but cannot. So the West uses academics like this fellow to put forth their views. The barely hidden agenda is clear to the perceptive observer. This anti nationalism stance being pushed by university professors and journalists in the West is perfectly in line with the ideology supported by the likes of George Soros, a Hungarian American businessman. Soros calls himself a philanthropist and has vowed to use his wealth to fight nationalists and conservative governments across the world, including the so called Hindu nationalist Modi government in India. Soros runs an organization called the Open Society Foundation, which started operations in India in 1999, offering scholarships and fellowships for study and research at Indian institutions. This effort quickly developed into active support for anti national elements in the media and in NGOs, as well as support for the so called intellectuals in India. All of them play a role in manipulating facts to build a mischievous political and social narrative. Basharat Peer, for example, is an Open Society Fellow. He is a journalist and has been known for articles with a pro Pakistan slant on events in Kashmir. A few days before Eric Garcetti, the current US ambassador to India, took charge in Delhi, the US Embassy published a tweet expressing their support for Saima Rahman, a radio jockey, saying that she uses her platform to amplify quote unquote diverse voices and inspire change. Now, this lady, Saima Rahman, is well known for peddling fake news and for creating trouble needlessly. Whether it is incitement to violence or false rumors about the COVID vaccine, disinformation about Hindu men posing as Muslims, or normalizing anti Hindu bigotry with misleading explanations of terms like kafir and jihad, she has done it all. So it's hardly surprising that she would be promoted by the West as a tool for spreading disinformation and undermining Indian interests. This is well in line with the US ambassador's stated intent to actively raise human rights issues in India, which can be interpreted as meddling in a sovereign country's internal affairs to try and undermine its government. India's geopolitical rise is inevitable now, but the West will continue to do everything in its power to slow it down. Western media outlets like Time Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, etc., which many Indians seem to hold in high esteem, are actually a tool in this effort to undermine Indian interests. Many professors and journalists of Indian origin in the West are pliable, paid workers in this effort to damage India's image and well being. Even more dangerous, many Indian citizens like Basharat Peer and Saima Rahman are willing participants in the effort to foment trouble and work against their own country's interests. I would recommend that you be aware of what these people are trying to do day in and day out. Be an informed citizen and don't be misled by such mischievous efforts to delegitimize a free and fair election in the world's largest democracy. If you like the material I shared today, give this video a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Until next time, take care.